Welcome to another video. I've been living with this 2023 Mazda CX-5 Turbo Signature all-wheel drive for the last week, and I'm going to share with you guys what I like and dislike about this little CUV. First things first, let's turn this car on and let's go for a little drive. So being a Turbo Signature all-wheel drive CX-5, this is pretty much fully loaded. It has an MSRP of just under $42,000, which is a little over $1,000 cheaper than the Mazda CX-50 I reviewed a few weeks ago. So what do I like about the CX-5 so far? This particular car has a Soul Red crystal metallic exterior with a Katora brown interior, and that leads me to the first thing I like about the CX-5, which is the way it looks. In terms of the exterior, I really think this is a very well designed little CUV. Nothing about it is offensive or over the top. It has smooth, graceful lines all around the exterior. Everything flows together very well. And that's without looking as run-of-the-mill or anonymous as this class of small CUVs has been known for quite a while. And I think the interior of this car matches the exterior very well. It's a very cohesively designed CUV. It's classy and I would say even borderline luxurious in Turbo's signature all-wheel drive trim. There are plenty of dedicated physical controls on the center console, on the steering wheel, to give the driver and passengers easy access to all the functions of the car. In fact, this main infotainment display here is not even a touchscreen. Mazda is still using this iDrive-esque rotary dial just behind the shift lever to allow you to control everything on this display. And I have to say, for the most part, at least within Mazda's own infotainment system, it works quite well. You can operate this system without having to get your dirty fingerprints all over the screen, although I made the mistake of not doing my research ahead of time and I thought this was actually a touchscreen the first time I got into it, so my dirty fingerprints are all over the screen, but please ignore that. This car comes with a heated steering wheel, which is really nice in cold weather. It heats the 9 and 3 parts of the wheel. It has 3-stage heated and cooled seats. It's got a Bose sound system, which sounds pretty decent for a $41,000 car. It comes with a wireless phone charger just below the center console. And the overall fit and finish of this interior is at a pretty high level, just like the CX-50. It reminds me more of an entry-level luxury car than an economy car. The stitching on the dash is very nice. And fortunately, it doesn't have the sort of human skin stitching look that the CX-50 has. It's got this wood texture with brushed aluminum on the passenger side. The steering wheel is leather and it feels very nice to the touch. It's just the right thickness, this outer rim. And being a 3-spoke design with a small center airbag, it actually has quite a sporty feel. This car's dash is a combination of analog and digital dials. The tachometer, the water temperature, and the fuel gauges are all analog, whereas the center speedometer there, which can be toggled between different displays, is digital. But the way it's designed and the very deep black levels of the display make it very well integrated with the analog dials on either side. In fact, at first glance, I didn't even realize that not all of the gauges were digital. It's got a heads-up display that gives you plenty of useful information like your speed. It reads the speed limit signs on the road. It gives you warnings about the lane keep assistance, and it shows you your radar cruise control and the distance between you and the car in front. Now, on that topic, this car has a pretty good suite of driving aids. It has automatic emergency braking and pedestrian detection, lane departure warning, lane keep assist, adaptive cruise control, as well as blind spot and rear cross traffic alert systems. However, like the CX-50, there's still no auto steer capability, which is a feature that I'd love to see in this class of vehicle, especially in the $40,000+ range. And that brings me to my next point about things I love about this car, and that is the driving dynamics. In a world of incredibly boring to drive CUVs, the Mazda actually manages to be somewhat engaging. This car weighs over 3,800 pounds in Turbo signature all-wheel drive trim, but it handles its weight pretty well and is actually fun to drive. It has precise, well-weighted steering, not a ton of feedback through the wheel, but you do feel like you're connected to those front tires and you can easily place the car. It's very easy to maneuver. Handling for a CUV is very good without sacrificing too much ride quality. The suspension is a little on the firmer side, but it's never harsh, and I think that trade-off is well worth it. This car is powered by the optional 2.5-liter turbocharged inline-4 engine, and I really think this is the preferred engine choice for this car. You can get it with a naturally aspirated inline-4 that only makes around 187 horsepower, but I'm a big fan of this 2.5-liter turbo 4. With regular 87 octane gas, it produces 227 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque, but if you do decide to put premium gas in it, those numbers rise to 256 horsepower and 320 pound-feet. I'm currently driving it with premium gas, and this car feels properly peppy. I mean, if I floor it here, tons of low-end torque. That's what characterizes this engine. Even from as low as 1,000 RPM, basically idle RPM, if you put your right foot down, this engine pulls. The way this engine is tuned, it's all about the low-end torque. The red line is only around, it looks like 6,000 RPM, but this engine dies off well before then. There's really no reason to rev it past around 5,000. I think it really matches the use case for this car. If you want to just pass someone on the freeway, most of the time you don't even need to downshift. All you have to do is put your foot down, and that surge of torque just pulls you forward. It's really something else. I experienced this in the CX-50 as well. I also think this 6-speed automatic transmission is paired very well with this engine. Nowadays, a 6-speed torque converter automatic might sound like ancient technology, but don't think for a moment that this transmission isn't up to the task. At around 75 to 80 miles an hour in 6th gear, your cruising RPM is right around 2,000 to 2,500 RPM. That's plenty low, and you barely hear the engine at all at that RPM. Also, you don't need the gear ratios to be super close together because, again, of the torque of this engine. This transmission typically doesn't need to downshift to give you enough torque to pass people. So those are some of the things I really like about this CX-5. Now let's talk about some of the things I don't like. So a couple of gripes here, and the first one I mentioned earlier is the fact that this is not a touchscreen. This car has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, but those systems are not well designed to be used with a rotary dialer iDrive-like system. It works a lot better when you have a touchscreen. So when I'm driving along and I'm trying to switch between my music and my navigation and listening to my text messages, it really is a little bit cumbersome to have to use the rotary dial. You have to scroll through one by one and use the button to select whatever icon that would otherwise be a simple touch of the screen, and it just takes a lot longer to do simple things. The CX-50, on the other hand, does have a touch screen, but that system's not perfect either, because Mazda won't let you use it as a touchscreen while you're driving, only when you're stopped. And the screen in the CX-50 is mounted basically out of reach. It's all the way up against the windshield, making it very difficult to reach. Another minor disappointment for me in the CX-5 is the fuel economy. I've driven this thing for about 400 miles and I've averaged just over 24 miles per gallon. In an age where hybrid CUVs are offering upwards of 35 or 40 miles per gallon, I do wish this CX-5 could offer a couple of mpgs more. It would be really cool if Mazda made a hybrid powertrain for this car. But those are fairly minor gripes. I think the main thing that prevents me from wanting to spend my money on a CX-5, it's actually very simple and a little bit ironic. It's the simple fact that the CX-50 exists. For a little over $1,000 more, you can get what is, in my opinion, a far superior crossover. Even though I admire and appreciate the CX-5's exterior design, the CX-50 really just takes it up another 2 or 3 notches. It looks even less vanilla than the CX-5. The CX-50 is 6 inches longer while having a roofline that's 2 inches lower, so it gives it a more purposeful look. In terms of the interior of the CX-50 versus the CX-5, number one, the CX-50 has this sort of cliff of climate control buttons right below the air vents which I found a lot easier to operate without having to take my eyes off the road versus these climate control buttons in the CX-5 that are mounted at the very bottom of the center console. Also, and I'm pretty sure this is not just in my head, the very first time I drove the CX-50, I noticed that the turn signals, the buttons on the steering wheel, everything had a very tactile, clicky feel and sound. Whereas the CX-5 just has, I would say, normal, average tactility to the controls. For example, this turn signal here, it's fine, there's nothing wrong with it at all, but it doesn't have that satisfying snap, snap, snap that the CX-50 has. And as minor and inconsequential of a complaint as that sounds, those little minor details are what really differentiate the CX-50 from the CX-5 for me. It just makes me feel like I'm driving something a little bit more special and well thought through. The CX-50 also gets slightly better fuel economy with an EPA rating of 25 miles per gallon in mixed driving versus the CX-5's 24. And that's with the exact same 2.5 liter powertrain and roughly the same curb weight at around 3,800 pounds. The only real downside to the CX-50 that I found is the fact that it uses a torsion beam rear axle, whereas the CX-5 has independent rear suspension. What that translates to on the road, I would say, is very slightly superior ride quality and NVH levels in the CX-5, but I do think the difference is barely noticeable. You'd really have to drive those two cars back to back. Both CUVs trade a little bit of ride comfort in exchange for improved driving dynamics, so I don't think the torsion beam rear suspension of the CX-50 really is a big issue. So I do think it's hilarious that the main thing holding the CX-5 back, in my opinion, is the fact that Mazda has another CUV that's priced virtually the same that I think is the hands down superior vehicle. It's actually just the little touches, the little minor details that make the CX-50 feel like a more cohesively designed package. And for that reason, while I do recommend the CX-5 overall, I mean, the gripes I have with it are honestly so minor. If you're in the market for one right now, or if you're in the market for any small crossover in this price range, I highly recommend checking out the CX-50 as well as the CX-5 to see which you prefer. That being said, I'm curious to see what the next generation CX-5 will offer. Maybe even an EV that still retains some of the great driving dynamics of this generation. I think that car would really be a home run for Mazda. So a big thank you to Mazda for setting me up with the CX-5 for a week. Let me know what you think of the CX-5 and especially how it compares to the CX-50. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe for more content and I'll see you in the next one.